Welcome back, everyone. It's Dr. Hall moving into our second part of Lecture 17, where we're going to talk about expressive language or how we actually make language. First, I just want to acknowledge language is incredible. So it's very unique, it's very powerful, it's also very complex. So we're going to be talking about it in kind of the most basic terms for our purposes of this unit. You could spend years and years of your life studying and researching language. But let's just be mindful of what it is. So we're using symbolic representations. We're using these things called words, which can be combinations of sounds that we hear or letters that we see. So you can read apple, or I can say apple, and then that puts in your head the idea of this thing. That's my least favorite apple. Red and Delicious are terrible tasting. But anyway, it was a cute picture. And then there are also, and sometimes it's concrete things, right? Or I can say happiness, which interestingly has many of the same letters as the word apple, but conveys a completely different type of thing. And this is like a non-concrete thing. It's kind of an abstract idea. We also use symbols within the language, right? So we have letters and phonemes and all these different things to allow us to create the words, which then convey the ideas. So it's incredibly amazing what we can do and what it has allowed us as humans to do. It's outstanding. It's amazing. So that said, let's talk about expressive language. So how do I express myself using language? Obviously, I can talk. I can also write things that you can read, right? Or I can type them, yes? So I can talk to you, so that would be speech. I can write, maybe I'm typing things or I'm sending you a text. I could also use sign language. And all of those things involve contractions of muscles. So all of those things involve the very coordinated and precise contraction of muscles to either speak or to do the things with my hands that I need to do in order to convey that language and those ideas using language. So expressive language is all about motor functions. This is efferent. This is we are contracting muscles and doing so in a very precise, sequenced, and organized way. So therefore, we need our motor association area to come up with a really good motor plan. And so you may remember from our last unit that the specific area of the motor association cortex, which is involved for language, is Broca's area, which is found down here in what is often termed the inferior frontal gyrus. Inferior because it's low down, it's in the frontal lobe, and it's one of the folds. It's a gyrus. So this is the part of the brain that makes the motor plan for the sequences of muscle contractions that's going to make the thing happen so that you can speak or write or type. In the vast majority of people, it's located on the left side of your brain. So Broca's area is on the left side. In a small number of left-handed people, it is on the right side, but in most people it's on the left side. So let's think about these motor pathways then, since we just learned about the motor system. So Broca's area now, so first of all, my prefrontal cortex is going to be involved in deciding what it is that I'm going to say. And then Broca's area is going to send its motor plan to my primary motor cortex, or M1, which you know is located in that precentral gyrus of the frontal lobe, where it's going to synapse with my upper motor neuron. My upper motor neuron is then going to send its axons down through the corticobulbar tract. Because if we're talking about speech and talking, that's muscles up here and in my throat. So that's going to be cranial nerve territory. So that corticobulbar tract then is going to synapse with the lower motor neuron, which is going to be located somewhere in the brainstem, depending on exactly then which cranial nerve we're going to send the axon of the lower motor neuron out. So then the lower motor neuron is going to send its axon out to innervate at the neuromuscular junction, the muscles that we're going to contract to make speech. So let's think about all the different muscles, right? So your tongue is involved when you talk. I want next time you say a sentence, I want you to pay attention to all of the different complicated things your tongue is doing. And then your lips, right? So right? All kinds of things. Your mouth, your cheeks, your palate in the back, how arched it is, your pharynx, your throat, your larynx itself for your vocal cords. All of those things have muscles that then control our ability to make all the different ooh, sounds that we make for speech. You're like, that's not a sound we make in English. I know, but okay. So let's just take that review a step further and think about, well, which cranial nerves might actually be used in speech? So trigeminal is sensory for the face, but also does the muscles of mastication. So that masseter muscle that opens and closes your jaw, which you certainly do as you're talking. So even though it's a muscle for chewing, you're also going to use it for speech. Your facial nerve is going to be a big one. So remember, the sensory for that is taste in the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, but it does all the other muscles of facial expression, the lips, cheeks, all those things, which are going to be really important for creating and generating specific sounds. Glossopharyngeal, taste for posterior third of the tongue, but also the muscles of the pharynx, the muscles in your throat. So if you've ever been in choir and your choir teacher telling you to open up the back of your mouth, the back of your throat so the sound can resonate, that is your pharynx. You're actually using muscles to change the shape of the back of your mouth, basically. And then the vagus nerve. So I've been teasing you a little bit so far in the semester. We've only learned about some of the sensory components of the vagus nerve. So remember, it conveys taste from the pharynx. It also conveys sensory information from the GI system. And I left out our chemoreceptors. So both glossopharyngeal and vagus nerve convey sensory information from the chemoreceptors. I'm going to have to add that to your master file. Sorry, everyone. So remember, glossopharyngeal is conveying information about CO2, O2, and pH levels from the carotid bodies, and the vagus nerve is conveying the same information from the aortic bodies up to the respiratory center. Okay, but motor function of vagus, first one we learn about now is that it actually controls a lot of the muscles to the larynx. So if you've taken anatomy and physiology with me, you've done this before, but take a moment, lightly put your fingertips in the front of your throat and talk, and you will feel vibrations happening there. That's your voice box or your larynx. And then as you talk, I want you to feel how it moves around, especially if you take the pitch of your voice up and down and up and down. You can really feel it moving around quite a lot. So the larynx also has muscles to help us to speak, and very much to sing when you have to change your pitch like that. And then finally, cranial nerve number 12, the hypoglossal nerve, is for the tongue. So there are all types of things that we do with our tongue, positioning it in different parts of our mouth, against our teeth for t kind of sounds, and all different types. I'm not a speech language pathologist, but you can't talk without your tongue, right? Anyone who's watched Game of Thrones knows that. Okay, so just a nice opportunity to review cranial nerves. What about if you're writing something, right? So what about if you're handwriting? So depending on your dominant hand, most people, it's their right hand. Yes. Interesting. Okay. So Broca's area is going to talk to the upper motor neurons in M1, which is your primary motor cortex, for movement of the hand. So wherever in the homunculus the hand is, it's usually somewhere around there. So that's our upper motor neuron, which is then going to send its axon down out of the brain and into the medulla, where it's going to decussate or cross, and then it's going to go down through the lateral corticospinal tract, where it then synapses with the lower motor neuron, which is sitting in the ventral horn of the spinal cord, which sends its axon out through the ventral root into a spinal nerve, and then eventually a peripheral nerve, which then branches into smaller nerves until it reaches the muscle. And then you have the neuromuscular junction and all the things we've learned about there. So since the language center is on the left, it kind of seems like maybe is that why most people are right-handed, right? Because then it's really easy, because it's like, oh yeah, this is the side of the brain where the language is, and so it's really easy then to send signals right here to move the right hand. I don't know, maybe. So I tried to find a really good video or some good sources on this, and I found a lot of kind of hogwash. And so anyway, there are some studies that show that hominids, our ancestors, have been right-handed for a long time, that they preferentially used their right hands for tasks that required more coordination, even before we think that people had any written language. So maybe not. Or maybe when we invented written language, we were just already right-handed, and maybe that's why the left side of our brain developed. I don't know. But in left-handed people, sometimes Broca's is on the right, which would support that, but not all of them. We don't know. But it's interesting to think about. What about typing? Now, this is interesting. So typing or sign language, depending on the signs that you're making. So if you're doing anything other than just doing the letters with your hand, you're often using both hands. And what's interesting is whether you are typing or doing ASL, those are language, right? So this is also language expression. This is motor behavior that has to do with language. So it involves Broca's area, sends signals to the primary motor cortex, and then they have to cross, right? But then sometimes we have to, if we want the left hand to move too, we also have to send signals to the primary motor cortex on the other side, right? On the right side. So that's kind of interesting that we have to do that. So there's a condition called Broca's aphasia. So if someone has damage to Broca's area in the brain, they often develop what is called Broca's aphasia, named after a neuroscientist who first described it. And folks who have this condition have difficulty then coming up with that motor plan to convey language. And so what's interesting is they will often have difficulty with their speech. It will be halting, difficult speech, lots of pauses. It's like they just can't spit it out. They just can't get the word out. They will also usually have trouble with writing and with typing, because those all involve Broca's area, no matter what medium you're using to convey language. They all seem to use Broca's area. Now, people who have this condition generally don't have any trouble comprehending, right? So they have perfect comprehension and understanding of the words. They know what word they want to say. They just can't get it out. So one of the videos that you will see is of Sarah Scott, who had a stroke that impacted Broca's area as well as some nearby areas. So pay attention to the symptoms she describes and see if you can figure out where her stroke was. And so you'll see a video of her pretty soon after her stroke, and then many, many years later. And she still has continued deficits, but has been able to regain quite a lot of function. So in summary, language is unique and powerful and complicated. But when we express language, we are doing so, except for when we're talking in our own heads, which is a whole nother thing, requires motor activity. So muscle contractions, whether it be speech, writing, typing, texting, or sign language. So Broca's area is the part of the motor association area that forms motor plans for things that involve language. And in the vast majority of people, it is located on the left side of their brain. So it's one of those unique examples of lateralization where there's something that the left side of the brain can do that the right side of the brain cannot do. So Broca's area will signal the primary motor area, the primary motor cortex, or M1, which will use whichever pathway is required. If it's speech, that's head and neck, so we're going to use the cortical bulbar tract and cranial nerves. If it's anything with our hands or other parts of our body, that's going to be, if magic foot, for example, is going to be the lateral cortical spinal tract, and then out through the spinal and then peripheral nerves to get to the muscles of the body. And then folks with Broca's aphasia have difficulty producing language in forms of speech or writing or often even typing. All right, so that's it for 17B. I'll see you next for receptive language.